Hi there, I'm Christine from Secret Garden Mercantile and Country Brocante here in the Pacific Northwest. And I took some time today to show you from start to finish through a little project using Iron Orchid Designs products. It's a little long, but it does show you the nuts and bolts of using the products, and they are all available on our website at secretgardenmercantile.com, or you can come and visit us at the farm and we'd love to see you. Let's get started. Good morning. How's everyone this morning? I'm Christine and I am from Secret Garden Mercantile and Country Brocante here in the Pacific Northwest. We're in Washington. And I am doing this video this morning to get started with some demonstration of how to use IOD products and some of the paint products and so forth that I have available at my shop here. So I think we'll just go ahead and get started right away. What I'm going to do this morning, I thought it would be good to show you right from the very beginning. There's lots of YouTube videos out there where people show a lot of advanced skills and that kind of thing, but it would be good probably to start right from the beginning of the process. These are some wood panels and they are available as an IOD product. However, they usually, the ones that are IODs are the 8x8s. These are little 6x6s that I actually purchased on Amazon in order to do some demonstration with the products. So I'm going to be using some Amy Howard one-step paint, and you can use that or any type of chalk paint. We do have a wide variety of the Amy Howard colors available here and online for you to purchase. And I'm just going to open up this kind of a old can that I have of the Bauhaus Buff, which is a lovely white color. And it's kind of an off-white. I'm just going to stir it up really nicely. And then I'm going to go about just painting my little panels, my little wood panels. And I've got a 2x2 brush here, and I just use a chip brush. This is a well-used chip brush, and I'm going to bring this down so you can see what I'm doing. A very well-used chip brush here that I'm using, and I like the well-used ones for these types of projects because they don't tend to shed as much. So that's important to get a nice smooth lay of the paint. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep painting away here on this little board. And put this here so you can see hopefully a little better. Let me try to get it in the screen. Just going to go ahead and coat this board with the paint. Doesn't have to be anything too fancy. The nice thing about this paint is that it smooths out really nicely, so you won't see a lot of brush strokes and that kind of thing. I'm going to paint the top and then go ahead and paint the sides as well. And that's how I'm going to proceed. And of course I get paint on myself and on everything, but that's part of the creative process, and I kind of enjoy that piece of it. So here we go. Gonna go ahead and paint this up nicely so we have a nice base for the project that we're going to do today. I'm gonna go ahead and finish this one, and I'm gonna paint one more real quick. Now, if you look at this, the other thing I do is try to do a little stroke across the edges just so that I don't have any blobs of paint there or any kind of drips or anything like that. Just kind of look at your piece and make sure that you've smoothed the paint nicely. And there we go. I'm going to smooth it again up on the top. A little bit of roughness is fine. There's not a problem with that, but you don't want a whole lot. This one I'm going to go ahead and paint the edges first, I think, because it kind of helps to do that sometimes. So I'm going to go ahead and get those edges out of the way. I'm going to go ahead. And the other thing is when you are doing this process, you might consider after you finish or even before you finish painting the back of the panel to give it a more professional look. But right for this, we're just going to go ahead and get it painted so we can proceed ahead with the other steps that we're going to do. Okay, almost got the sides done. A little more on this side. As you see, it goes pretty quickly to get these done because they're small little panels, so they're kind of nice to practice on. There's that one, and then I'll go ahead and quickly paint the top as well. Hopefully you can see this. I'm not sure about the angle of my camera. I'm still getting used to doing everything, so let me see if I can get this out of the way and move it down a little bit. There you go. So you can see what I'm doing. There, that's a little better. Okay, so just trying to get some paint laid out on this panel. And this paint is kind of thick, so it covers really well. It also smells nice. They actually add a little essential oil to it, so it's a pleasure to paint with. It has very low VOCs, so nothing, no volatile organic compounds that you have to worry about as far as health, and it's a really nice product. And then it bonds really well to both wood and painted surfaces. So there's less sanding involved in prep work with this paint. So it's a very nice paint to work with for furniture design and restoration as well. All right, I think we've got that pretty well painted, and we're gonna go ahead and stop the video for right now and get ready for the next steps. Hi, we're back now, and I was waiting for a little bit for my panels to dry after I painted them, but I do notice that there's a little bit of wetness, and I want to make sure it's just slightly damp particularly on the edges of the panels. So I'm going to use my little heat tool to speed up the process just a bit. So you'll see me doing that, and I apologize for the noise. Just going to go ahead and speed that up and go along the edges particularly and help it dry a little quicker so that we can move on with our project. This usually works to speed up because I'm impatient. I don't know about you guys, but I'm always impatient when I'm trying to do something and get something finished, and especially if I have limited time to do it, which is usually the case. And because we're all busy and doing other things, multitasking all the time. So I'm going to go ahead and just get this to dry a little faster. So it's just a little tip to help you. And you can use this one of these little heat dryers or heat tools, excuse me. It's particularly for like embossing and that kind of thing, but I use it for this process as well. Or you can even use a hair dryer or a bigger heat gun. I usually reserve my bigger heat gun for heftier projects, but this is really helpful for just little things like this. So, all right, so we're getting there. It feels like we're pretty well set. I think everything's pretty good and things look pretty smooth. If there's any excess paint, I can kind of just give it a little rub to get it off. This one, I think I missed a couple spots. Got a little holiday on that side. So I'll go ahead and paint up a little bit. I didn't put my chip brush in water right away after I finished painting, so I've still got it here. And check, this one has it too. Always check for holidays, because otherwise you'll be surprised later on that you had those things, and you'll say, darn it, after you get your whole project finished, you'll notice that suddenly there's more spots that you missed. Okay, so that's finished. Let me check this one. It's a little more complete, although this side could use a little more. So I'm gonna do that. couple spots on this end. And then I think then we'll be good. All right, and then we can go on to the next steps. I'm gonna put my brush in some water now just to preserve it. And even though it's an old chip brush, it has, you know, continued use. I've used these chip brushes many, many times. I just soak them in water and then I dry them and clean them real well. And they are wonderful little utility brushes for these purposes. And I'm gonna go ahead and close up my paint now. It's all crusty, but that's okay with me. I don't mind it being a little crusty. So I'm just gonna pound it closed with my 5-in-1 tool. These are just wonderful tools to have, by the way. You can get these at a hardware store. They're wonderful for opening cans. They have the perfect torque on them to open a can. For doing sensitive things where you have to kind of poke at things, they're great. I don't know, I haven't used this as much, but I'm sure it's useful. But they work almost like a hammer in terms of being able to pound the cap back or the top back in place on the can of paint. So we're all good. All right, we'll move on to getting ready for the next steps. Thank you. Okay, well, we're back, and I'm Christine. And I am from Secret Garden, Mercantile, and Country Brocante. I also have a lavender farm here in the Pacific Northwest, so I sometimes get a little confused about saying Secret Garden Lavender versus Secret Garden Mercantile, but we're in the Mercantile section today, and that's what I'm trying to work with you on a project. As they say in Sound of Music, we'll start from the very beginning, and that's what we're trying to do today, is show you the very basics of how you use the IOD products. This is a little panel that we just finished painting, and we painted it in color, an Amy Howard one-step paint, and it's called Bauhaus Buff. And my plan today is that I would like to use one of these really beautiful transfers on it. These are called Ephemeral Melange, and they're little seed, little art from seed packages, and there's all kinds of beautiful florals in here. So I needed to look through and figure out what size would fit what I'm trying to do with this project. And I like some of these little French labels, but I thought I'd like to see some flowers, and I particularly like this rose one here, and then the pansy one, or I guess those are nasturtiums actually. Nasturtium one is also quite beautiful. So trying to figure out which one to do. Also, I was thinking of incorporating a mold into my panel. So if I want to, I might do one of these, the smaller ones, as well on the second panel. Or there's always, ooh, this is a really pretty one too. I think I'm going to use the peach colored rose one on the first panel. But the other thing that I want to do before I go ahead with my transfer is I would like to do some antiquing or distressing or making it look kind of antique on the back side of on the panel itself. And in order to do that, what I've decided to work on is using these stamps. And these are IOD stamps, which are wonderful to use. They're very nice, large decor stamps. Oops, mine is slipping down because this is a well-used stamp that I've used for many projects. But here is the one that we're going to be using today, and it's a crackle stamp, okay? And the way that I'm going to be doing it is I'm going to be actually, whoops, I've got my ink over here. Normally I would use IOD ink, and you can mix and match the colors on IOD to come up with various types of color range. But in this case today, I think I'm going to stick with using a distress stamp. which is the Ranger Distress, and it's archival ink, and it's in the color Vintage Photo. Now I know from using this stamp before that it didn't have a whole lot of ink on it or it was a little dried out when I got it. So I'm gonna add a little bit of ink to it just to make sure that it's got enough on it. So I'm just gonna go up and down a little bit on my stamp to make sure that we've got some ink there. Just to soak it in a little bit. Give it a little extra around and about. There we go. And you can get these little refills for your favorite colors. And this one, like I said, is Vintage Photo. And I think that's really nice for background stamping, especially for this crackle effect that I'm trying to achieve. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take my stamp, and these stamps are little, they are stuck onto a backing, so they have an actual backing on the stamp, okay? And I have already done this, but I will show you what I do with the stamp. I need to prep the stamp a little bit, and the way I do that is with a little 220 sandpaper, and just give it a little prep so that it adheres, the ink adheres a little more easily to it. So I'm going to do that real quick. And I think I already did that with this stamp because I think I used it on other things, but I was just going to show you how to do that. So you want to go one way with the sandpaper and then the other way, and you want to use a very fine sandpaper, so 220 or above, so 300 would be good. Now I'm going to go ahead and stamp the stamp with some of the ink. I'm going to actually try this on some paper before I do it on my board, because I want to make sure that I get the right amount of crackle. I don't know that that's coming off very well onto the, and then I'm just going to try it here, and all you want to do is press down nicely on your stamp. Make sure that all of it is adhered. The main thing is, once you place a stamp, you want to make sure that you don't move it, because otherwise it'll smudge your pattern. And actually, I don't know if you can see this, but it really looks great. It actually turned out great on the paper. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to re-ink it just a little bit. Once again, just to make sure that it's got ink on it. But I think it does. So I don't want to overdo it either. But I'm going to go ahead and stamp or add ink again to my stamp. Just so. And it's already on the backing that IOD provided, so we're all good that way. And then the thing that I want to do is figure out how I want this to look. So this is going to be, the crackle is going to be behind the transfer. However, when I look at my piece, my stamp is smaller than my piece. And so I'm going to go ahead and stamp in a few different areas. So what I'm going to do is go up to the top of the piece, the board, the panel, and stamp in the corner and make sure that I cover that area, going all the way out to the edges. Go ahead and do that there so that I make sure to get everything covered with the stamp. And there we go. It's beautiful. It turned out beautiful. I don't know if you can see it there, but that's the crackle. And then I'm going to go ahead and stamp over on this side some more. Try to kind of line it up so it looks relatively even. However, I'm not going to worry about a little bit of imperfection as far as how the pattern meets itself, because once I've got that transfer on, it's going to be center stage. Okay, so we've got that. I'm gonna re-ink it a little bit in the bottom, on the bottom, because that's the area I'm gonna use. And just in this spot here, across here, and I don't have to re-stamp on the whole thing because that's gonna mess up my pattern. But I'm just gonna re-stamp the areas that aren't covered. I'm just gonna put pressure on the areas that aren't covered with my fingers. Okay, so there we go. And it's you know, it's a little bit blobby in through here, but I think that will be less obvious once we get the transfer on, and we'll see. The other thing about this is you can always sand these once the ink is dry. So the next step that I'm going to do is go ahead and dry my ink. And I'm going to do that with my little my mini heat gun here, my embossing tool. I'm going to cover up my ink pad to keep it moist. And you can touch it to just see a little bit if it's, you know, you don't want your ink smudging at all. So that's important. And it doesn't appear that it is, so we're good. And I'm going to stop the video and go on to the next step. Okay, we're gonna get restarted here, and I just wanted to show you now what I do right away with my stamp. I want to make sure that I clean the ink off of it, so I use a wet wipe to gently not pull at the stamp too much, but I just want to clean that off right away. And you can see all the ink that I'm getting off of it right off the bat. And then I'll wash it after we're done here with some warm, gently soapy water. And just wash it gently with soapy water. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And usually I put it in water right away too, so that there's not a problem with the stamp. So the ink adhering to the stamp. Now I've got a little bit of, if you notice, there's some little streaks, and I think I'm going to go ahead and try to sand those just a little bit and see if I can lessen the look of that up a bit. And I may do more harm than good to it, but I'm going to try it anyway. And again, you never know what you're going to come up with, but I think I'm going to try to sand that out just a little bit so it's not quite so prominent. And that looks a little better. I just don't like that line of cracks that seems to be, and that's where I stamped over myself a little bit when I was applying the crackle stamp. It still looks a little, I'm going to do a little more sanding in the other areas too, just so that it doesn't look unnatural there. Just try to even it up a bit. Okay. Yeah, I think that looks better actually. Here's our sanded board. I think it looks better that way. That's what I'm going to do a little bit. You can still see that little line a bit, but I don't think it's as prominent, so I like that better. So, all right, the next step is to go ahead and get our transfer ready. And again, the one that I've decided on using here is, that I think I've decided on using anyway, although this is really a nice one too. It's so hard to choose because they're so beautiful. All of these stamps are just gorgeous. Anyway, it's this top one that I decided to use with the roses. And so I'm gonna go ahead and cut that one out. And you can see in between, there's areas to cut the stamps out in between them. So I'm just gonna cut that out of there. And this is the nice thing about these transfers, is you don't have to use them all at once. You can get a lot of use out of one booklet of transfers. Okay, so here we go, and here is what I've decided to use is the roses, and I'll have it on the crackle background. That'll start out what we're going to do. Now, in order to use the transfer, what you want to do is it's got some grids on it. You can measure where your center is. In this case, I'm going to eyeball it, I think, because that tends to be what I do a lot of. But you want to take the backing paper away from your transfer, okay? And there's a part that's against the transfer. And now you have a very thin, kind of translucent piece. And you have the grid side, and that's going to be up, and the transfer side, which is the white side, basically, I don't know if you can see that very well, but it's the whited outside, is going to be what you put against your board. So I'm going to go ahead and position it, and I'm eyeballing this, so who knows, it might get crooked. I think I might change it around a little bit and put it up right that way. But I want to position it so that it's kind of right in the middle, and then also I can measure. I should have measured my middle probably, but that's okay. I never do, and sometimes it's off. And then set it down onto the board, and then you can kind of smooth it with your side of your hand onto the board. Just gently smooth it out from the center out. Okay. And then you use this fancy little tool that comes with the transfer, and it's just a little plastic tool, but it's got the perfect curvature in order to do your, to apply your transfer. And what you're going to do now is you're going to use it as a little, almost like a scraping motion, but it's a very soft motion, and you're just going to rub it against the back of the grid side of the transfer. And once you get it all rubbed in, or somewhat rubbed in, then we're going to actually start peeling back our transfer, but we're not quite ready yet to do that. I'm just going to kind of give it a good rub throughout, and then I'm going to start peeling my transfer back gently. And I'm watching as I'm peeling to see what part of it is adhering. And the main thing I'm looking at is on the grid side, is there anything sticking to it? And you'll be able to see if there's little bits sticking to your grid. You can see that mine has nothing sticking to it so far. If there's anything sticking, you can put it back on and actually rub it a little more. And that's how you release the transfer. And some transfers are a little stickier than others, so you want to make sure to do it with this process, each little bit at a time, and watching it the whole time to make sure that your transfer is adhering, because once it's on there, it'll be nicely adhered to the wood. But in the meantime, you want to make sure that it's all coming off onto the wood and it's not sticking to the grid. That's the main thing with the transfer. So that's what we're doing right now, is I'm just going ahead and kind of rubbing away. And it's a gradual process, and it's kind of, it could be a little boring, I suppose, for people, but I think it's such a miraculous thing that the transfer does. And then sometimes it just comes off quite easily, but you just want to make sure that you're not missing any little bits of the transfer, because otherwise when you get everything done, you'll realize, ooh, there's a spot missing. So maybe one of your printed areas, or a little part of one of your leaves, or a flower, some part of your transfer might be missing, and that's not good. That's not what you want to achieve. You want the full picture. You know, sometimes the thing is, while you're working on it, if you catch it in time, if you're looking at this little grid and you're making sure there's no pieces of the transfer adhering to it, but if there are, you can lay it right back down and rub a little more and get that off of there and onto the wood. If, however, you get to the end and you remove your grid, then it's very difficult to go back in and reposition it. Sometimes you can do it, but it's not easy. And then at this point, and this has some really small print on it too, so I want to make sure that I'm getting it all. But at this point, I'm going to go from one side to the other to make sure that I'm getting adherence of everything. So I'm going ahead and taking my time, using a patient approach to the whole thing, a little bit at a time. Larger transfers obviously take some time to do. Oh, and there I did it. See, there's a piece of the lettering. I'm gonna have to put on my glasses for this job. And it says Springfield, Ohio there, but luckily I have the grid to help me line it back up perfectly. That's the nice thing about these transfers, is they have this grid on them, and so I can line it up back on here perfectly, except for gotta make sure it's in the right position. It says Springfield, Ohio, and I'm missing the Ohio part. And so I'm going to move Ohio back in here a little bit and make sure it lines up very nicely with the Springfield part, and then re-rub. And I should be able to get that off of there, hopefully. Otherwise, we're just going to say Springfield. But I think I'd like that Ohio on there. It kind of gives it a nice genuine touch to it. There we go. It came right off and it's perfect. Okay, so there you go. Oh, it is off a little bit. It's off center a little bit, and that's unfortunate. But there's our transfer right on the board. Turned out pretty nice though. It's such a pretty transfer. What I think I might do is put a little mold down this side, and it'll have something written on it. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking about. But that's why you probably should measure your board and not follow my instructions. I always think I can eyeball it. Next step is to go ahead and just gently, and this feels like there's something on it that's sticky. You want to just kind of, with the sticky side of this paper, generally, you want to, it might be that some of my ink or something is sticking to it. I don't like that feel to it. So I'm going to use this little smooth paper instead. I want to just very lightly buff it to make sure it's adhering very nicely to the board, which now I think it is. Including my little Ohio blooper there. So, yep, it looks very nice. Okay, so there's our first transfer. And as you can see, it turns out really nice with that crackle in the background, and it gives it that kind of antique touch. All right, I think we're gonna take a little break, and maybe I'll see what I can do with a little mold on that side. All right, see you soon. Hi there, we're back, and now I'm working on this project still that I had started, doing my transfer on the panel, and we stamped, just to go over kind of what we did, we painted the panel first with some off-white paint, Amy Howard Bauhaus buff, and that's a one-step paint, and transfers adhere very nicely to it, so that's another reason why I like to use it. And then we went ahead and we did some stamping of an IOD stamp and the crackle portion of it. And that stamp, just so that you know, is called Vintage Textures. And that's what we used. We used the crackle portion of the Vintage Textures stamp. And we actually stamped crackle background on the panel. And then we went ahead with the ephemeral melange rose transfer and rubbed that onto above, over the crackle. And so far we've turned out this way. Now I did take my chances and I eyeballed where my transfer was going to go. And I feel like I need something in this side. And again, this is that artistic part of what we're doing. You can always, adapt and do something different. But I have just what I think is going to be the right answer for this. And I'm pretty excited about trying this because I haven't used these molds or stamps yet. So you're going to be using them with me. Anyway, what I chose to do is I'm going to be using the Iron Orchid Designs Conservatory Labels mold. And these are wonderful molds that we can use. And I'm going to open this up. Oh, and I just realized I didn't get my clay out. So I'm going to get my air dry clay out. But these are these molds, and they're wonderful silicone molds. And this is what I'm going to be using for it. So I'm going to put the video on hold for just a moment and go get my clay and also my cornstarch because I need that for a release for the mold. So I'm going to do those things. All right, hold tight. All right, we're going to get started again. So here is my mold, and I'm going to be using this air dry clay from Iron Orchid Designs, and it's a wonderful air drying clay that that we sell here at Secret Garden Mercantile. And I have some that I've had for quite some time. But what I do is I put a little damp paper towel in here with it to keep it fresh, and then add it to a Ziploc bag. And it seems to work really well, and it keeps my clay nice and fresh. So, so that's what I do for my clay. Let's see. And then what I'm going to do is with the mold, I'm going to actually put a little bit of cornstarch. So this is just regular Argo cornstarch. And I'm going to just put a little bit on with a clean paintbrush on my mold. And I think the mold that I chose to use is it's a little background mold. And if you look on the back of this, you'll get an idea of the different type of little frames that are in this mold, and they're darling. They're just wonderful little frames. But I'm going to do mine vertically on here, and I have an idea to maybe stamp some letters on it. So we'll see how this all goes. And I'm going to use this middle one, and I'm just going to go ahead and coat it a little bit with some cornstarch. And don't put too much cornstarch. But I'm going to put that in there just so that the clay does not stick unnecessarily to my mold. And then I'm just going to grab a little bit of clay here. And I'm going to kind of squish it out so that it'll be similar to the shape of my mold. It doesn't take a whole lot of clay, especially this mold is not particularly deep, so that's the good thing. And then I'm going to go ahead and try to squish it into the mold nicely so that I hope you can see this. I'll try to move it around that way so you can see me going ahead and squishing my clay in. And I kind of want to get it nice and smooth on the back because I want it to adhere. I want it to be relatively flat and have it adhere nicely to the board. And let's see, I'm gonna use my little, actually this is my transfer stick, but I'm going to use it right now for this as well. Multi-purpose sticks to just kind of squish that clay down into the mold nicely. Get a nice flat. And the nice thing about these molds is they have a ridge around them, so you can just kind of wipe away the excess clay from the ridge so you don't end up with a lot of excess on your board. So you can just kind of, and I sometimes use my fingernails to get it more precise. But just wipe it away. Try not to get a bunch on the back of your mold. And then what you want to do when you're taking this mold off, and this is a key aspect of it, and what I did was I got it nice and flat into my silicone dip there where that's going to make my mold. And then what you'll want to do is actually use gravity to release the mold. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn it right side up, or upside down, excuse me, and kind of, here I can do it so you guys can see it better. I'm going to pull my mold away, pull the clay away from the mold, I should say. So there it is, and that's a beautiful little mold. Again, it has a little excess, so I'm going to pull that away so that I don't have to deal with it later when it's actually adhering to my wood. That's perfect. Now you can see this mold right there, and it's got lots of definition, nice details. Now the idea is I need to decide exactly where I'm going to put it on my board, and this is where I'm deciding to put it. Is over on this side, and I'm going to have it, I'm going to actually have a word inside there. So, and I might just to even it out a little bit and make it look not so heavy, I might actually encroach a little bit on the rose pattern, but it might look more realistic that way, or more balanced, I think. So that's what I'm going to try to do. And in order to get it to adhere to the board, I'm going to be using Titebond glue. And here's my bottle. It's the Quick and Thick multi-surface Titebond, and it works great for these types of applications. And the cap seems to work really well too to keep it from drying out. So we will see, because this one's been sitting there for a bit. We'll see if I can get it out, but I think we will. Well, maybe not. It's coming out, but it's coming out a little bit at a time. I might have to give it a little help with something. Let's see if I can find some toothpick or something. I'm just going to poke at it a little bit and try to get it flowing a little better. It's flowing a little better now. And I'm just going to put some on here like that of my Titebond, and then rub it around. And I'm just going to rub it around with my finger and then wipe my finger off, I think, to get it smooth on here. Nice and smooth. And I prefer not to have a lot of excess, because then I don't have a lot of excess on the front of my board to clean up. And again, I'm going to wipe off my fingers on my handy wet wipe here. So, and then I'm going to go ahead and place this on my mold again, centering it as best I can on up and down on it. There we go. There. Now I got that stuck on my board, and I set aside my the cornstarch. But then I would like to ideally put some letters on. So what I'm going to use for that is this other wonderful stamp set that's from IOD, and it's the Apothecary Labels. And again, we carry it here at Secret Garden Mercantile or online. And it's a lovely little stamp set. It has all kinds of great sets of letters in it, and various different sizes and typesets of letters. And then also frames that you can stamp, which are wonderful. And you can actually stamp these into clay as well, or you can stamp them directly with the IOD ink on your projects. So I'm intending actually to make some for some little apothecary bottles that I'm going to be doing for my little shop too. So that's the concept. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm going to like this as well as I hoped I would, but we'll keep at it and see what happens. Anyway, here I'm going to wrap up my clay a little bit to keep it nice and fresh, even though it's not new, but it works really well. And then I'm going to go ahead and figure out my stamping, which I might have done in advance. That would have been wise, but that's okay. Now, IOD also sells in there. It's wonderful. And again, we have these available. These little pieces of thin set. And they are thin mounts, I guess they're called. But anyway, they're great. They have a grid on them, so you can arrange letters and that kind of thing on the with your stamps. And so I'm going to just cut a little piece off one of these thin mounts because these letters are pretty small. But I want to organize my letters, and I'm going to do it on this little piece right here so that you can hopefully see what I'm doing. I'm going to go ahead and organize my letters on this little thin mount, okay? So that then I can go ahead and stamp them on my stamp. And I think what I'd like to just say on here is Rose, R-O-S-E was my plan. And hopefully it'll fit. So we shall see. But first I'm going to go ahead and take these lovely brand new stamps out. And I'm going to go ahead and tear off the cover piece of plastic off of it. And then the other thing that needs to happen was that with this is it's brand new, so it needs to be conditioned. So what you do is you just take some 220 grit sandpaper or, finer, and you just rub it back and forth a few times and make sure you cover all of the different pieces of the stamp. Because again, you want to be able to have it adhere to whatever you're trying to stamp with. And you do it 2 directions, okay? So you want to do it both directions. And make sure that you've conditioned your stamp completely. And after I get done with this video, I'm going to go to all those other pieces of my stamp and make sure that I did those too, because that way I'll know when I open this stamp that it's been conditioned. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and get my letters set up. I think I am, if I can find my piece. Oh yeah, there it is. All right, so it's going to be in reverse when you're setting them up on here. So recognize that, that's fine. And but you can push your letters down onto your little piece of thin mount, just like that. The letters stick to it. And what's nice about these letters and what they've started doing now with the stamps is they are kind of a light turquoise or a green color. And that makes it really nice because you can see the little stamps. And especially when they're the small stamps like this is really nice. So I'm going to keep pushing my stamps down. And I'm just going to find the letters for Rose, R-O-S-E, which is a pretty simple one, which is nice because I don't have a lot of duplicates. You know, I think I would like to have 2 sets of these because then I wouldn't end up needing as many letters. It's always nice to have 2 sets. Ooh, let's see if this is going to be right. And I have to put it right side up to make sure that E is in the correct position. But it's nice to have 2 sets of letter stamps because that way you don't run out of letters. Okay. Yeah, that looks right. Just see that E and make sure that yep. So there is my rose word, okay, and I got it all laid out on there properly. Now I'm going to see, oh yes, okay, so what I wanted to see is if my rose, here's my stamp, or excuse me, there's my frame that I just made out of my mold, and I want to make sure that my word rose fits in there, and it luckily, as you can see here, if I put it up here so you can see it, it fits in beautifully to it. It just fits perfectly right inside of that mold. So it was made in heaven, I think, this little stamp and mold set. So I'm going to go ahead and, can you see this hopefully? I'm going to just position it and press my stamp into this little frame that I've made out of clay, okay? And there it is, and it just is beautiful, and it says rose on it. How about that? Isn't that lovely? Yeah, I like it. Okay, so that's my rose clay mold, and I'm trying to figure out if I want another mold to balance it over on this side. I'm not sure if I do or not. I might just leave well enough alone, and I could always add something to it later if I decide to. So that's that, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to work on this mold a little further, and I'm going to paint it and add a little bit of glaze to it, I think, to go ahead and, sorry, I'm admiring my work here, but I'm going to go ahead and try to paint my mold and then add a little bit of glaze to it to antique it. And I'll show you how I have to go about doing that. I kind of missed a step because I should have actually sealed this part first, so I think I might do that next. All right, see you soon. All right, we're back, and here's what I'm going to be using for this next step. I'm going to go ahead and open my paint can back up, my old grungy paint can. Anyway, but it's a wonderful paint. It's Amy Howard One Step, and it's called Bauhaus Buff. So it's the same color paint that I used on the base for this, on the pattern. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just very lightly paint over this mold that I applied, okay? And when I say lightly, I mean lightly, because you don't want to, I'm using a new chip brush here, so it's got a little bit of, I'm going to see some loss probably of some fibers from it. But the reason why you want to do it lightly is because you don't want to push on this stamp too hard, because you'll lose the definition. And I've done that many times when the clay is still moist. However, it's nice to paint when the clay is still nice, because when you're painting it, it kind of gives it a sealed effect, and it helps to prevent as much cracking of the clay. So if you don't want that cracked, distressed look for your clay, which I actually don't mind having that so much, it's kind of fun to have, but if you're trying to avoid that, then you can certainly paint so that you don't have as much of the chipping, as much of the cracking of the air dry clay as it's drying. So I'm just trying to paint this little mold without pushing hard enough that it makes it. It's got such wonderful detail. All of these molds have great detail. And so I want to make sure that I don't crush it or smudge it too much. Smush it, I guess I should say. Don't want to smush my mold. Oops, something fell over. All right. No worries. Just gonna have this. Okay. I got a pretty good bit of paint on there. I'm not sure if I got it quite inside the letters, but I'm not too worried about that because I'm going to use some glaze in there too. And I'll use a softer paintbrush and I'll let that set up a little bit first too. I'm going to go ahead with this. Oh, it's kind of interesting. I'm going to go ahead with this and I'm going to use my little heat gun again. As you notice, I use that quite frequently. And I'm going to let it, I'm going to try to get it to dry a little bit before I apply any glaze to it. And the reason why I'm going to be using some glaze on it is because I want to give it kind of that antique look. So that's the idea. And to also bring out those letters a little more. Okay, and that does a real nice quick job of drying. You know, I can take my fingers and feel that it's pretty dry already. And there's kind of a dry crust over the, I'm going to do a little more on the edges because I can feel it's kind of smushy still. But there's kind of a dry crust over the clay. You can kind of feel it. I mean, if you were to push on it, it would still allow you to, you know, push indentations on it. But at this point, we can still work it. So that, I mean, we can still do things like paint over it and that kind of thing. So that's good because that's what we want to be able to do. I'm going to call it good enough with the paint for right now. I'm going to put my brush in some water, cover up my paint, and I think we will go ahead and move on to applying a little glaze on this as well, just to give it that little antique look, which hopefully will also blend in with our crackle, because as you notice, see, the mold kind of sticks out more than I would like it to. And it may still do that, and I put that in there because I fudged it as far as my centering, but it looks kind of interesting, so we'll see what happens. I would have preferred to use my mold at the base and do my letters upright, but this is what I decided to do to save myself from my earlier mistake in centering. So, all right, be right back. All right, we're back here at Secret Garden, Mercantile, and Country Brocante. And the next step that we're going to be doing on our little panel is that I'm going to go ahead and seal it. And for this, I'm using the Amy Howard matte sealer. And it's a wonderful product that you can seal just about anything with. I use it on furniture, and it makes a really good seal for paint. And I want to do this before I use my glaze to make sure that my glaze doesn't soak in too much. And I'm going to go ahead and start sealing. So that's what I'm going to do, is just right over the top of it. And you'll see that this initially, when I put it on, here, I'm going to it down so I can get a better angle on it. When I initially put it on, it looks a little milky, but it's going to dry perfectly clear. So, but I want to seal, and I want to seal my transfer on nicely. The important thing, obviously, is to have your crackle, you know, that I did with my ink. I want to have that totally dry before I put any sealer, especially when you're using a brush on, because, and sometimes because these are all water-based products, which is really nice because they're low VOC and not as toxic, and they don't smell bad at all, which is nice. There's no odor to this whatsoever. But the important thing to know is that, and I'm going to go ahead and just paint right over, or seal right over my little clay mold that I placed as well. I'm trying not to get too much around it so that it pools. But because they are water-based products, if you have something that's water-based, for example, IOD inks tend to be able to reactivate sometimes. So you want to be careful that they're completely dry before you add something that's water-based, or any kind of fixative for that matter, to them, because you might run into problems with smudging. And we do not want that. That can spoil a project in a hurry. So I'm going to go ahead and get this. I'm just going to coat the sides too while I'm at it, because I hadn't done that yet. And I want that paint to be nicely sealed. It always gives such a good feeling to seal something. And the other thing is you can use other types of sealers. So you can use a satin sealer or something like that if you choose to, if you want, or even a gloss for that matter, to get a more glossy finish to it. But right now I'm just going to go ahead with the matte. All right, and I think that's plenty. You don't want it on so thick that it's pooling or anything. You want to make sure that you brush it out nicely so that you don't have a problem that way. And again, I'm going to use my little 5-in-1 tool to seal my container back up. These seal very nicely and last for a long time. So, oops, I just put my fingers in the sealer. I tend to get a lot of stuff on my fingers, and therefore in this little cute little glass bowl that I stole at, well, I didn't steal it actually, but I got it at my daughter's wedding shower. I always have this here to put my little wet wipes in, and the dogs are barking because Amazon has arrived. Anyway, okay, and then I'm going to go ahead one more time and dry this with my little dryer. So I'll do that right now. I have good watchdogs here at the farm, so they keep me safe. Okay, let's see, this is still a little on the wet side, so I'm going to give it some time to air dry, and we will return. Okay, our little panel is now pretty dry. It's interesting because I actually dried it a little bit with the hair dryer, and that was what I used. And you know, I noticed that my ink turned almost a sort of a greenish tone when I was drying it, and with the sealer that I used. So it's possible that the Ranger ink did have some sort of reaction with the matte sealer. So that's very interesting. I've never had that happen before, but I noticed it. I actually really like it. It goes really nicely with my roses and the leaves of the roses. So now the question is, what type of glaze? But I think I'm gonna stick with this. This is the Paint Couture Amber Honey, which I chose because I thought it would go well with that background crackle. But now that the background crackle has turned a little greenish, I think I'm still going to use it, and maybe I'll put a little, I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but I think it'll look pretty on it anyway. So that's what we're going to start on. And hang on just one second. I got to make sure I have the right. Excuse me, the right size brush here. Oh, I do have it. Okay, so this is just a regular craft paint brush, and I'm going to use that. Shake up my glaze really nicely. And I'm just going to and I'm going to do this very gently and delicately because I don't want to get it all over. Ooh, my glaze is sticking to the top here. But I'm going to, it's interesting. There we go. Okay, I'm just going to put it over my little mold here, but I want to make sure that I don't get it all over the place. So I don't really want to get it onto my background. The place I do want to get it is inside these letters because I want to be able to see the letters better, and I'm going to be wiping this back, hopefully. Carefully on the edges. I better put on my glasses for this one. I'm going to be putting this on, but I'm going to be wiping it back, but I want the letters to still show up. So that's what I'm working on here. And I probably could have watered this down just a little more, but that's okay. It'll be fine. It's easy to paint with this way, with this thickness anyway. I'm just going to paint around. I'm painting carefully around the edges so I don't get it all over the background is the point here. So that's why I'm doing it carefully. We have a whole lot of pollen in the air today, so my nose is all stuffy from that. It's crazy. We've had so much pollen this spring. I don't think I've ever seen a spring with so much pollen. I think it's the moisture in the air initially, and then now the warmth. I'm just trying to get this on here nicely without getting a whole lot on the background. We'll see how this goes. And there, we're almost there, almost covering it. Put it right side up there. Okay, almost got it here. I'm just making sure that I've got pretty good coverage all over my little mold for right now, but then as you see, as I go, I'm going to be actually wiping that back. Okay, so here's where my wet wipe comes in again, and I'm going to take this and actually very gently, because I don't want to disrupt everything that's I don't want to disrupt the clay is the concept. I'm going to kind of dab at it and kind of very lightly try to wipe back the glaze on my mold. That's what I'm working on right now. So I just will take I get it all over my wet wipe, but I'm going to keep folding my wet wipe in order to use newer areas of it that haven't got glaze on it. And then I'm going to kind of pat at it in some areas to kind of give it a little bit of antique look. Another thing I might do is put a little in the corners. I'm not sure that I like this color as well. I almost wish I'd chosen more of a green, like a verdant green for it, but it's a good start though. Take it back quite a bit here, because I don't like, a lot of times I don't like the darkness of an antique glaze, but I kind of like that. I think it's coming along my rose. Yeah, I think it's kind of pretty. And I might, I do like that. Let's see, I'm just trying to figure out if there's anything, maybe I can lessen the look of the glaze and the crevices a bit, because it's a little, sometimes it just seems overwhelming to me, and maybe that's just me. I like a delicate look to things. There. Maybe it's, I like understated more. So there you go. There's my little rose stamp. It's lovely. It turned out really pretty. There's that. And then the question is, are we done? You know, that's the hard one, is always, are we done? But I think we might be getting darn close. I think maybe to tie it all together, it would be good to have a little bit of glaze around, maybe just kind of on these edges and on the corners a little bit. I'm going to do that. I'll be bold and try it. And then just a little, I'm going to offload my brush a little bit, so I'm not putting a whole lot on there. Oop, I see that I have a, must have been from my, I have a hair from one of my brushes, my little chip brushes in there. It was stuck in the sealer, so I had to get that out. I'm going to put a little more around the edges here too. Just to, and then I'm going to wipe this back, of course, because I don't like it too heavy. Let's see what happens with it. Just to kind of tie it together is my idea. Yeah, see, I'm just kind of dabbing at it now, just playing with it. And that's, I think, what you do is you just kind of play and have fun with it and decide how much you want of what on it. I'm going to take a bit more off in some of these areas because, like I said, I like a subtle look. I don't like it too heavy. But I'm starting to really like this, I think. And I think maybe I'm just going to leave it just like that, because I really like that. And you can see all of the details. There's a lot of crackle to it. I don't know if you can see the green crackle with the lighting in here, but you've got the little rose on the little rose there that's on a little mold, and some antiquing done to it. And we've used almost all of the types of IOD products. We've actually used the stamps and an inlay, and we used a couple different stamps actually, and a mold, and stamps and a transfer and a mold, and we have not used yet a paint inlay, and that'll have to be for a different session, but it's pretty fun here. I see one spot. Yep, no, I'm going to leave it just as is, and we did a little antiquing with some glaze. I'm going to take a little off this side because it got a little out of control. Sometimes you kind of have to clean up after yourself here on the details, but I think it turned out awfully pretty, and that's a pretty little kind of a shelf sitter or something that we can use for a little decor item for spring. So I think it's just going to go right in my shop, and I think it highlights some of the other items very nicely. All right, thank you so much for watching, and come back to Secret Garden, Mercantile, and Country Brocante, and we'll have lots more where this came from. Thank you. Bye-bye now.